All right, what's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope you guys are well. Yeah, let's see if we can get some of this out of the way here. All right, shout out to everybody. Hope you guys are enjoying this winter. Hope you guys are starting to look like you're gonna have a good holiday, all that good stuff. But welcome back to the Onyx Report. Shout out to everybody. We are broadcasting across 6 different platforms, so hopefully this will work out all right. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, X, and Instagram. We're trying Instagram again today. It looks like it's working, but we'll find out as we go. Y'all know how we do. Kind of build the ship while we're flying it. It is what it is. We are also, of course, on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel if you will, so we can continue to bring you this independent black male thought. So I hope that everything is working smooth. Shout out to Dead Set, first one in the building. What's good with you, man? Donnie, what's up? Shout out to I'm Listening. We got Raheem. We got Indigo Flow. What's going on? Steven. Andre, what's up? Hurricane. Mark, what's going on, Mark? KJ Eternal, what's up? Got Melanated Caesar. Tim, what's going on? Busy Mike. Good brother Malika, always good to see you in here. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to Mr. Shug. Compassionate and Callous, what's going on with you? We got Prince in the building, what's up? LXST. Atlanta State Focus. You know what I'm saying? Looks like quite a few people joining on Instagram. Mr. Blue Collar, I see you over there. What's good? You know, so we're gonna see how this goes. Anyway, so we're trying to get it in. Y'all know the deal. Hit the like button as you come in if you would. Support the channel. You could also donate. There's a variety of ways to do so. You can see on the screen. You can do the Patreon, Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo. You can do the super chat if you're on YouTube. You know the deal. Because contribute to the show, keep us going, so we can continue to develop the Institute for Black Male Studies as well as the Onyx Report itself. Hi, Scholar. What's good with you, man? Yeah. Oh, Mr. Blue Collar, you on 2 different platforms. That's what's up. Andre, I'm not, man, I haven't looked at it in so long, but you should probably look up my name, Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. You should be able to find it on Twitch over there. You know? So as y'all are coming through the building, 142 so far just on YouTube. Can't tell yet on Instagram how many that is. Looks like quite a few though. But welcome as you come in, support. So as y'all know, finally finished grading, slept for a couple days, just trying to clear my head and, just kind of get my stuff together. And the holiday season is already kicking off right. Make sure you support the book if you haven't already. Pick up my latest text, Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry, Blackness and Black Male Death, The Black Masculinist Turn, Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. You can get that on Amazon. You can get that on Routledge. You can get that pretty much anywhere. Pick up the book, check it out. Support, again, if you will. But this is my son. And he made it in last night, drove himself home, as you do for the week, for the break. And it's good to have him back. So he's, we just lounging. So I'm glad to have him. Crazy proud of him. Finished his first semester in college, knocked out his finals. I'm waiting for those grades. I got the oral report. I need to see the printed one. So we're working on that. But it's all good, So glad to have him home. Also picked up one of my latest joints. This is from my Robotech days. This is an upgraded Veritech. I decided to go ahead and increase the collection here at the house. So I went ahead and picked up my favorite character from Robotech back in like 4th grade, Max Sterling's ship. This is the upgraded version. So I had to go ahead and share that with you, for my nerds out there, or my geeks who understand the importance of supporting your inner child and appreciating the things you still appreciate and being unapologetic about it. Liking what you like, you know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. But yeah. So I'm chilling, I will be, when I finish the show, go in there, cook up a couple steaks, kick my feet up and relax with my son. So it's all good. I'm in a good place, and I will report that I will be doing a review of The Color Purple. I will probably go and check it out. I think it's next Tuesday, I think is when I'm going to go see it. And as a matter of fact, so I'll do a show about that. And we'll actually compare and contrast with the old version as well. So I'm going to watch both. And I damn sure hope y'all are going to support the damn show, because I could really be doing something else other than swallowing hemlock twice, but I'm doing it nonetheless, because it looks like they're trying to indoctrinate a new generation with a very particular type of anti-Black misandry. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to choose this story if you were saying something. If you were saying anything different, this was not the story you needed to pick, unless you are purposely trying to poison people with and enhance a very particular, well-ensconced hatred of Black men. So we're going to go ahead and review that next week. So, support me so that I can continue to do that. All right. Dardar says, I'll pray for you. I appreciate it, because I'm going to need that shit. I do not want to. This is not what I want to do during my holiday break, but I know brothers are, going to need it. They're going to want to, get a kind of outlook with it. So, Des says, watch that hemlock down with plenty of ginger. Huh? Malika, appreciate that. So shout out. This is congratulations. There we go. On your son's first semester. By the way, I'm a fan of Rick Hunter. I always liked Max, man. He was a genius. He was undefeated. If you watch, he only showed him a couple times, but he was nice with his. He was nice with his. Had the blue Veritech. That was my boy right there. Anyway, so obviously we're gonna have a little conversation today, and it's going to include Jonathan Majors. It's not going to be limited to Jonathan Majors. because I think there's something much bigger going on, right? Much bigger going on. There's a video that I ran across, and this might not be the only place this term comes from, but I do have to give credit to where I came into it. And there's a guy here. Now, this guy is a millionaire. And in this particular story, he talks about how his ex tried to hit him up for, I think, about $9 million. About $9 million. Trying to see where I put him. Yeah, there he is. So his name is Brian Johnson. And this is a YouTube video entitled "My Ex-Fiance Sued Me for $9 million." Pretty straightforward. And he tells the story. It's pretty brief, not a long story, but pretty straightforward. And he actually reads letters that she sent him before suing him and so on and so forth. And then she makes this accusation that he's committed these, grievous acts against her, and they go to court. And it's, he actually wins, wins his innocence back. But he uses a term that I had not heard before, but it made perfect sense when I did. Hold on. Anyway. Okay, let's get it. All right. So it made perfect sense when I did, right? The term is called the accusation economy. And this is what he's talking about. Now, obviously, as a millionaire, he's talking about it from a particular angle, right? He's talking about the way in which any particular person, most usually women, are going after men and accusing them. But here's the thing. In his case, her whole approach to it, with, of course, her lawyer's support, was to scare him in terms of his reputation and get him to settle out of court. And she wanted $9 million, like within 24 or 36 hours. Like, she was hitting him up hard with a letter from lawyers. And they didn't expect him to go to court. So he took him to court and he beat it. But the idea is, he was saying that this whole notion of an accusation economy, especially when it comes to the wealthy, has to do with pressing them in regard to their public reputation. And nowhere is this more, dire than if you are a public figure who, it's one thing to, be an owner, CEO, one of those things, or just a well-to-do whatever. It's a whole other thing to be a celebrity. And this is one of the things we notice has been going on, most particularly since the rise of Me Too. Now, if we look at Me Too in and of itself as an instrument for those who've been sexually assaulted and are looking for justice, I have no problem with that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that doesn't happen. I myself was a victim of sexual assault, especially as a young man, a couple of different times. So I'm not arguing that that doesn't occur. What I am arguing is what we do ignore, what we pretend is not happening, is that this doesn't produce an economy of people who are willing to ruin people's public reputations for gain, financial gain most particularly. Now, one could ask the question, all right, well, that's for the wealthy, that's for the celebrities. How exactly does this impact everyday dudes? Well, we can get to that in a quick second. Let me first start by shouting out Wannabe. Shout out Wannabe Mystic. Appreciate that. He says, here's some money for that 12-pack. You'll need to wash it down the color purple. Real talk. Real talk. Dead set. Said, for the safe return of little Hasan. Now, that's Rakim, man. Yeah, that's his name. Rakim. I appreciate that. Yeah. Glad to have him back in the fold, man. There's something about seeing your son, becoming a man, driving himself back home from college to visit the family, driving himself back to school. I'm with it. Shout out to MS Delta. What's good? Appreciate that support. He says, Fuji song, Ready or Not, Here I Come. You can't hide. I'm going to find you. Just don't get involved in the first place. Hey, it is what it is, man. That's what we're dealing with. But yeah, so one would ask, how does this accusation economy impact poor men, everyday guys who aren't millionaires, billionaires, things of that matter? Well, there's a couple of different things. We could point out 4 things just off the bat. Right. First one being, we've seen this as a tactic in divorce, especially in regard to child custody. Right. And I've talked about this before. I've even had lawyers reach out to me and confirm that they've witnessed this in their practice. They've witnessed other lawyers convincing women to arbitrarily accuse husbands, fathers of molestation as a way to guarantee custody and, of course, increase resources. Right. Even the threat of jail. Right. Or, even the pressure that he might extend payments in some other kind of way, even if it's extra legal, right? but being willing to do so due to a false accusation. And this is not an occasional thing. According to some of these lawyers, this is a quite frequent thing. This is a common thing. We started to see in the last 20 years a rise in men across the board being arbitrarily accused of touching their own children, especially when it comes to custody and women trying to secure custody. So that in and of itself is a tactic that we're seeing. Another one is, in the court of public opinion, one of the ways to build up what I call social equity, right, is to align yourself, particularly as a woman, as a victim to male aggression, male sexual aggression at that, right? And in the court of public opinion, evidence is not necessary in the slightest. To make the accusation, especially against Black men, is enough. It's enough. And as we'll see in a couple of cases we're going to cover tonight, even if men are able to prove, even white men, even when they're able to prove their innocence, it doesn't matter as far as the court of public opinion. The fact that you were accused was enough. Most people just tend to assume you got out. You got away with it. Maybe you had money, whatever. But for the most part, the idea that you were falsely accused kind of goes out the window, right? So that's a couple of things. Another one, and this is a clear one I think a lot of men can speak to, poor or rich, is revenge. When women feel slighted, and even if the slights are her perceived slights, they're not necessarily things you did, they're things that she feels like you did. That's enough. Revenge can become a tactic that some people use simply because they can. And this is the problem in and of itself with this accusation economy. It's very gynofocal, right? Men can't arbitrarily accuse women of sexual assault, rape, so on and so forth. You can, but there's no public empathy for that. There's still not a narrative in the public mind for what that even looks like. So, like, if you go back to the 1970s, right, and when we talk about Roots, we talk about the series Roots, the very first series that came on TV. It gave the country, right? It gave the entire country a snippet of what slavery was. And so now you had a kind of narrative for slavery that people could resonate with, whether they liked it, whether they didn't like it. At least there was now a public narrative as to what slavery is, right? And a lot of the narrative about Black history came about after that. And I don't mean Black history itself. I mean, there were people for generations doing that research, publishing those works. But in terms of the public consciousness, what people were willing to digest and understand about slavery, for the most part, had a huge transformational shift after the 1970s because of Roots. Now, when you talk about women, you talk about sexual assault, you talk about violation, feminists were the first to really push these policies through. So from then, the advent of policy to the impact on media, the stories have principally been about female victimization. You don't really have a roots element in media for male sexual victimization. In the Black community, and I said this before, the closest you get to that is Antoine Fisher. Antoine Fisher. Movie coming out, I think, the late 90s. Derek Luke. Kind of an underground flick, not the biggest thing in the world. I mean, I think if Denzel didn't direct it and wasn't in it, most people wouldn't even know what it was. But that's the closest you get, but you really don't have a Roots, or what The Color Purple became for Black feminists, right? Color Purple for Black feminists is what Roots were to the story about Black slavery. So we don't really have that. So there is no collective, empathy or vision for what male sexual vulnerability means. In terms of being victimized. There's no sense of it. So people treat it like it's not real. And because of that, when you get back to this accusation economy, it's primarily a power in society that mainly women and some children can use if they're cognizant enough to use it, right? And when I talk about the accusation economy, it includes justifiable accusations as well as non-justifiable accusations. The question becomes, what is the nature of the accusation, and do we have evidence? Is there reasonably convincing evidence to support that this accusation is valid? That's the dividing line. But the accusation economy can include, just accusations. So I'm not arguing that this doesn't happen. I'm not arguing that men never do it, never violate women, and I'm not arguing that women don't. And see, that's one of the principal differences between those like myself and the black feminists and feminists in general who would argue, and I've even heard this from scholars, that it's only women that can be victims. Women, and because of this, we've created a whole economy around, believe all women. We say we're past that. We say you're innocent until proven guilty, but clearly we're in a situation where this is a one-sided accusation that only women can really make in society. Men, for the most part, are silently kind of snickered at if they come forward. I mean, think about Terry Crews. Men and women laughed under the table at Terry Crews, right? So to talk about that, and we're gonna kind of look at what these types of victimizations can look like. Shout out to MS Delta again. He says, my political science professor used to say, guilty until proven more guilty. Real talk. Real talk. That's principally what we're looking at. Let's see, International Quiet Storm. Appreciate that. Support black male media. Thank you. And see, that's part of the issue too. Where are you going to get these kind of conversations from? You're not getting it from the mainstream. This is why you have to support black male media, because you can't have these conversations in the mainstream. Nobody's going to talk about the accusation economy or even support the very idea that there's such a thing as false accusations. And as soon as there's a false accusation, it has to be swept under the rug and dismissed as soon as possible. Shout out to Johnny Depp. And people really overlook how critical Johnny Depp's case is, because in that instance, he got her on audio saying nobody's going to believe you. Essentially, she could say whatever she wanted and she would be believed. This is at the crux of why I'm pointing to the accusation economy. And this is why I'm looking at this gentleman here, Brian Johnson. Now, I'm not going to play the clip. I will put the link in the description box. Especially, you might have to remind me. I didn't do so beforehand. But you can find the video. My ex-fiance sued me for $9 million. A key piece. Because he talks about her abuse of the public's will, her abuse of the public's perspective on female victimization. And he was one of the people that was able to prove his innocence. Now, we have a lot of people, especially black males, who find themselves in these various situations. Even a short list, of men. It's a mix though. So you got like Jamie Foxx, Eric Adams, Axl Rose, Cuba Gooding Jr., Chris Brown, Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, R. Kelly, Brian Banks, Johnny Depp, and we can go on. And we're going to look at a couple cases in a moment, right? Again, I'm not saying all these men are innocent. What I am saying is that it's not required much evidence to mark these men as guilty. And we do have to acknowledge that there are methods that can be used uniquely against men that can't be used by men in their own defense. This is a one-sided dynamic. And we ignore it so that we can hyper penalize men and leave men as the scapegoat for anything that goes on. Maintaining the idea that women are, these kind of beautiful flowers that would never lie. I argue it's human nature. If you give any population, any demographic, an ability and access to access, if they're given the access to an ability that no one else can, and they can exploit that to their own good, and there's no evidence required for them to use it, it will be abused at some point. It will be abused. And this is simply what we're arguing. But let's look at a couple of things, a couple of different cases. And these are pulled, random. This is not limited to black men in this instance. Let me see if I can pull the first one up. I may not read through all of them because we got quite a bit to go through tonight. But this is the first one. All right. Shout out to Poor Man's Passport Guide. Appreciate the super sticker. Shout out to Andre. Says, thanks, Doc. Your voice is important. Support black men. Appreciate that. All right. So this is the first one. All right. Former Bills punter Matt Araiza. I know I'm going to butcher his last name. I don't follow sports a great deal. So Araiza, forgive me if I ruined it, speaks out after grape claims against him are dismissed. Right? And you can see this, People magazine, well, I guess they don't call it magazine anymore, but people.com. This is December 14th, 2023, right? So just a few days ago. Former punter for the Buffalo Bills spoke to reporters in a press conference on Wednesday morning for the first time since grape allegations against him were dismissed. According to Fox 5 San Diego and Buffalo news station WGRZ, lawyers for Araiza, 23, and his accuser, known as Jane Doe, reached an agreement this week to dismiss the sexual assault charges against the athlete without a monetary settlement. Now, let me also say, notice how they list her as Jane Doe. This is part of what's important about this accusation economy. Yeah, dang. When you can actually make accusations of random people, especially celebrities that are well-to-do. Okay, Lincoln says Areza. Okay, thank you. When you can make these kind of random accusations and it doesn't require evidence and you don't even have to have your name put forward. I've talked about this one. I mean, Chris Brown was one of the clearest. God, the last situation that happened with Chris Brown, he actually had a woman accuse him of violating her. And then he pulled up all of the text messages that she sent since the situation, asking to come back, asking for all kinds of things. And her lawyers at that point abandoned her, right? But she understood. She understood how to play the game in the accusation economy. She knew the reputation that Chris Brown had, the fact that he was a black male and a celebrity, meaning he had the money. She could make the accusation. And had he not kept those texts, he'd be either paying or his career would be over. He might even be in jail, right? She knew that. And she exploited it for her own purposes. But the key was her name didn't even have to be revealed to the public. So these people can go on with their lives and not even have to be socially or publicly held accountable simply because they made an accusation. And we're supposed to believe that at no point is anybody going to abuse this. So you're in a situation where you can make an accusation, you don't require evidence, your name will not be made public, and you may walk away with a settlement, even if your evidence is shaky. As long as the person doesn't even want to fight it, just wants to get it over with, you can walk away with money, millions, depending on the situation. Even with some of the celebrities that, have been hyper accused on a number of cases going back decades, 5 decades. Hell, there are some celebrities, certain black male celebrities, in fact, who are dead and being accused in perpetuity. Not even alive to address their accusers. And yet, and still, their accusers still don't even have to be made public. And no evidence. And we're going to act like there are not a variety of different economies going on. Some celebrities, as a matter of fact, I know for a fact, have literally developed relationships with women in cities across the country and across the world, putting them up in penthouses, apartments, and basically have an arrangement. Even if they're married. When I come to town, it's you and I. I come through my spot, whatever you got going on, make sure you clear that dude out or anybody else. It's me and you. Otherwise, I cover the bills. You make yourself accessible to me when I call. When that person steps forward, even decades later, and accuses you of something, what do you do? Right? But again, we're going to pretend like, that doesn't happen because that becomes a problem. We can't envision that you have a population of people that are presumed to be perpetually innocent and yet can be capable of exploiting people on that basis. But this is common. Shout out to Cameron. Says, appreciate the work, Doctor. Deshaun Watson had to face claims of 20 plus Jane Does. See what I'm saying? Like in an economy where people are struggling, that's not even more incentive for people to push forward to make accusations. I mean, what's the cost? You're going to find lawyers who are willing to support you if they can walk away with a bag. Hell, some of them will take up to 2/3, if not more, of what you get. But what do you care? If you can walk away with 1/3 of millions as opposed to whatever you had in your pocket in the first place, where's the incentive not to do it? Especially if you don't even have to be public. But let's continue with this. So I just want to kind of bring that up. But in a statement issued to Fox 5 on Tuesday, Areza's attorney, Dick Simmergian, and Kristen Bush said this week marks the end of August 22 civil lawsuit filed against our client. On Wednesday, Areza addressed media regarding the situation. It's changed me a lot. And how do you think it would change you? To find out how vulnerable you are to anybody. And this doesn't have to be a celebrity again. Talking to the average guy listening to me, what would you do if somebody said 20 years ago you did X? How would you prove otherwise? And what happens if your career, your livelihood is threatened simply because the accusation's been made? How do you defend yourself? Whereas even if you're able to defend yourself and you spend money you may not even have on a legal defense, you exonerate yourself, you may still lose your job or your means of income, right? All of that can still happen. There's no protection is the point. Shout out to Randall. Appreciate that support on the Cash App, right? There's no protection. And this is what we're getting at. Men have been made hyper vulnerable across class, right? And these accusations can have a variety of reasons for taking place. Actually, I only mentioned three. I think I talked about the divorce tactic for custody, the social equity in the court of public opinion. I talked about revenge for perceived slights. The last one I wanted to mention is that there's this accusation economy. How many lawyers, how many courts, how many police departments actually are able to yield a profit from these kind of things? How many news reports, websites, hell, even YouTube content creators? What does an accusation do? What kind of economy does it generate in the public? And is there any incentive to dismantle it and create something that actually does support the idea of innocent until proven guilty? There's no money in that, right? So when we look at this whole idea of false accusations, there's little reason not to do it. Shout out to Ghetto User. Support as usual. Crimes against men. Real talk. Dead Set says it doesn't get any easier after getting exonerated. I can speak on that from experience. That's what I'm talking about. Even if you're exonerated. And you hope you still have the means to support yourself and your family, because nobody's going to lose any sleep if you don't, even when you're innocent. And this is how you know that this is stacked against you, when even the innocent who exonerate themselves are given no apology, no acknowledgement, and are quickly swept under the rug because we can't have the very idea that this is a flawed approach to this dynamic. We can't have it because it means that we have to look at women as human beings. And we have to question if there's a significant enough incentive to abuse the public trust for individual gain, when it's your word against his. And as a black male, most especially, you look guilty simply because the accusation is made. It is what it is. Reza says, it has changed me a lot. He said, calling the time since the lawsuit was filed in August 2022 a roller coaster while delivering his statement. He's a former star at San Diego State. He continues. He said, my name, my reputation, this will be tied to me forever. That won't go away. Exactly. Following the accusation, Reza was let go from the Buffalo Bills, right? It was tough to watch the pain that it caused my family, because I have been proven innocent, but they for sure had absolutely nothing to do with this, Reza said in his address on Wednesday. The lawsuit filed in the San Diego Superior Court in August 2022 accused Reza of having sex with an intoxicated 17-year-old girl outside of a home and then bringing her inside, where she was allegedly further assaulted by Reza and former San Diego State football players Xavier Leonard and Nowlin Awaliko. I'm not even going to try that one. They were never charged in the case. Reza later admitted to having consensual sex with the victim that night, and again when speaking to USA Today Sports. We had a brief encounter, and it is absolutely not how it's been portrayed in the media or the lawsuit, he told the outlet. In December 2022, prosecutors determined they would not press only criminal charges following an investigation that spanned 124 days per the report. They would not press any criminal charges. I'm sorry, I'm tripping. They would not press any criminal charges. Little information was made available at the time regarding the circumstances that led to that decision, despite authorities having gathered more than 35 witness statements and 10 search warrants that found 4 terabytes of information regarding the incident. Damn. In May, USA Today obtained a transcript of the victim's meeting with Deputy District Attorney Trisha Amador that offered more insight into the lawsuit's dissolution through video submitted by Jane Doe from the night of the alleged incident. According to the transcript per USA Today, Amador told Reza's accuser, in looking at the videos on the sex tape, I absolutely cannot prove any forcible sexual assault based upon what happened. Furthermore, USA Today said the transcript revealed that the district attorney's office used video footage to determine that Reza wasn't even at the scene of the attack when the alleged gang rape occurred, or gang, I already ruined that, so I shouldn't be saying the term, but anyway, when the alleged gang situation happened, based on the physical characteristics of the men shown in the video. According to the outlet, the encounter between the victim and multiple assailants happened between 12:55 and 1:30 a.m., 1 hour after Reza apparently left the party. This should have never been able to get this far. Should have never been able to get this far. And yet it did. And how much empathy does anybody have for Ereza after the situation? Let's look at another case. Let's look at another case. Because again, these things don't happen, right? So we'll just act like they don't. So this one, February 9th, 2023, right? Columbus Dispatch. Jury finds 2 former Ohio State football players not guilty of rape. See them there. And how many of us would be crying too in that situation? See, this is a situation that, you know, and I can talk about it in terms of gendered lines because you don't see women experience this like this. They don't. Even when they're actually proven to be guilty of some type of SA or rape case, they're not made vulnerable to the public. They're not, you know, they don't really have to go through this. People don't immediately assume that they're guilty just because the accusation's made. You got to prove it. And then even when you prove it, you know what people tend to do more than anything? They tend to justify why it happened. They tend to want to explore, how was she raised? What did she experience? Who broke her heart? So on. I mean, these are the kind of questions people ask when it comes to female aggressors. But when it comes to male aggressors, the assumption of guilt is there. Shout out to Greg. Appreciate the Cash App. So it says a Franklin County jury on Thursday found 2 former Ohio State University football players not guilty of raping a female student in 2020 at a Northwest Side apartment. Amir Reep and Jocelyn Wint, both 24, were defensive players for the football team when a then 19-year-old woman in her freshman year at Ohio State accused them of violating her on February 4th, 2020. The jury found them not guilty on all charges, 2 counts each of rape and 1 count of kidnapping. And this, I mean, just like I said with the Nate Parker situation, he was a college student. He was, you know, found innocent in a court of law. He wasn't a celebrity at the time it happened, just like these 2 young men here. There's no reason to believe that any jury or court is going to go out of their way for the average everyday black dude. It's not, there's no incentive for them to do so. I mean, if anything, the incentives run the opposite way. So when you see black men proven innocent in a court of law, and yet and still, people dismiss it. Right? Defense attorneys Dan Sobel and Sam Shemansky, who represented Reep and Wint, respectively, argued during the trial that the woman had consensual sex with both men, but regretted it afterwards, and accused the victim's father of pushing his daughter and authorities to pursue criminal charges. So that means that she had the means to change her mind about how to interpret the situation. She could do so at her whim, and the world revolves around what she says. Shout out to Donnie. Says this hits close to home. At the same time as the 2 Ohio State players were fighting the case, a massage therapist, was jailed trying to give happy endings to the entire team. Crazy times. Damn. Shout out to Officer Faulkner. What's good with you, man? Hope you're well. Let's see. TJR, appreciate that donation. Says, peace, Doc. He said, I had to speak with Deputy Chief at my former job, as my boss at the time implied that I was coming to cause her harm. It was madness. I was assigned an undercover officer to monitor the day I went to pack up. See that? Oh, yeah. I remember when they used to put there was a moment, I think in about 2nd grade, where they segregated my son to the back of the classroom by himself. The only black male there, you know, only black kid in the class. Separated him, put him in the back of the room by himself. And it got to the point when I got to the school to argue with the principal, they had security on hand. So I had to bring a woman with me, and she had to speak, and they could hear her. Because the angrier I got, the more security was ready to come at me. Right? So the idea in and of itself that men aren't treated in problematic ways in these situations is ridiculous. So that's one case. So we know about the 2 young men at Ohio State. What's another? Now I'm looking particularly at cases where, you know, you had public exonerations. That doesn't mean that those are the only innocent men. It just means that those were the men who were able to prove their case publicly. Let's see. Where'd it go? There it is. This is another one. I think this one's in Europe, though. Right? Right? Footballer. Usually when you hear footballer, they're talking about soccer. But, Benjamin Mendy, cleared of rape and attempted rape. Former Manchester City player has now been found not guilty of all allegations made against him by 6 women. And I hear this a lot, right? I hear the idea that the number of women that have come forward somehow cements the guilt that much more. I'm like, okay, the number. So we're in an economy where people are struggling, and you got a millionaire who is being accused in the court of public opinion as well as in the legal court of having done something. Often, again, women don't have to, they don't have to be exposed to the public by name, by picture. They get to come forward, make the accusation, questionable evidence, if any, in the given situation. And yet people question why you would have multiple people coming forward for a millionaire. There's no incentive there. Here's what I mean. I actually think, and this is actually something I do believe we put in the Black Male Political Agenda. And if you don't know what that is a product of the Onyx Report, this very show. In 2020, I believe, was the first one we did, but we have a 17-point Black Male Political Agenda. And it is an open document where we are continuing to add policy ideas that will improve the quality of life for Black males. It is currently at 17 points. Have no problem with it going more than that. But in there, we actually do advocate for those who initiate false accusations for such crimes, and even false paternity, right? That they actually do have to suffer jail time. It's not that there aren't laws on the books for this, but they're not implemented. Because again, the idea, especially in the eyes of the court, is that women are not to be really held accountable for human behavior. When you give them resources and access to things no one else gets, and it's abused, they're not often punished to the same extent that men would be. Shout out to LAPD SWAT, who gives a donation. He says, the movie Minister Society is true. The hunt is on and you're the hunted. Real talk. Dr. Dunbar, what's good with you, man? Appreciate the donation. Says, salute, Doc. False and unsubstantiated allegations are very dangerous and damaging for men. Real talk. And there's very little defense against them. Very little defense, right? So anyway, going back here, the former Manchester City footballer, Mendy, has asked for privacy to rebuild his life. Again, this is dated July of this year, 2023, after being found not guilty for raping one woman and attempting to do so with another. The former French international wept as a jury cleared him after a retrial at Chester Crown Court. The acquittals mean the 28-year-old defender has now been found not guilty of all of the allegations made against him by 6 women, which destroyed his football career. He has cleared his name, but is unemployed after his Manchester City contract expired at the end of June. The Premier League club stopped paying him in September 2021, shortly after he was charged. Though the manager was a character witness at his first trial, where he described Mendy as a really good boy. Terminology is a problem, boy. Anyway, right? The women had accused him of assaulting them at his 4.8 million pound gated mansion between October 2018 and August 2021. So, okay, multiple situations, often at illegal parties held during COVID lockdowns. He was cleared in January of raping 4 women and sexually assaulting another, with the jury unable to reach verdicts on 2 outstanding charges, prompting the retrial. He was acquitted on Friday of trying to rape a woman who came to his house with a friend of his, another French footballer, Jaco Fofana. She said Mendy tried to rape her when she got out of the shower, but he said they flirted and that he withdrew as soon as she said no. He was also cleared of raping a woman he had met at a bar in Alderley Edge, an upmarket in Cheshire suburb. Or whatever. During his first 4-month trial at Chester Crown Court, Mendy maintained that the woman had wanted to have sex with him. He told the jury it was normal for him to sleep with lots of different women, sometimes on the same night as they had sex with his friends. I see another part of this is when you're dealing with the world of celebrity, a lot of people can't deal with the reality of what that life means and what happens in it on a regular basis. And there is a lot of opportunity for people to exploit simply because they were present and participatory, right? So I'm not going to go through the full case, but you can check this out if you want. Another case of someone who got out. This one I found particularly interesting, right? Let's see. Yeah, here we go. So this one coming out of Yahoo Sports, right? Or sports.yahoo.com. Try to get in on his $51 million. Lindsey Hill lawsuit against Trevor Bauer is settled for $0. Former MLB star shows alleged receipts to prove extortion plot. This is October 5th of this year. Right? She came forward and said he beat her up after a night of some good fun. You know, he said he didn't, of course. One of the most damning pieces of evidence, however, was her videotaping herself in bed, laying next to him while he slept, with no marks on her, smiles all over her face, happy, all of that. Right? She videotaped herself. And so that's the only reason you would see a case like this settled for $0. Right? Former LA Dodgers pitcher Trevor Bauer and Lindsey Hill, San Diego woman who first accused him of SA, which led to an unprecedented 324 game suspension from Major League Baseball, have settled their civil lawsuits outside of court with no money exchanged between the two parties. But Bauer has kept alleged receipts, and in a video posted to social media, he points to an alleged extortion attempt by Hill. This is the crux, if not another one. I think I mentioned that earlier, but this is one of the major components to this whole accusation economy, right? Is there a reality to extortion? Is there an economy of extortion? Aside from those who have genuinely been assaulted in terms of this accusation economy, is there another part of it where you have people that are unfairly extorted, excuse me? See, we don't like to admit that in public. As a matter of fact, it's considered negative to do so. It's considered that you are making up things to not hold men accountable, but men have been held accountable for this for the longest. And here's the trick to it too. You can have a man who's committed this and yet still been extorted. Now, obviously, nobody's going to feel real sorry for that, but the reality is both things can happen at the same time. You can have innocent men unfairly extorted. You can have guilty men being extorted. Matter of fact, on the basis of their past guilt, it can serve as even more incentive to pile on. And again, how much evidence is required, especially if somebody in the court of public opinion is already perceived to be guilty, even of past situations. So you can look at the Trevor Bauer situation in and of itself. I'm not going to go through the entire article, but you can find it on Yahoo Sports. Again, $51 million Trevor Bauer caught her extorting him, allegedly, right? They settled for $0. You tell me how often that happens. And she was willing to come forward with this. Now, I'm surprised that her identity was made public because that is usually not the norm in these kind of situations. Usually not. And then, of course, we get to the main situation that people are talking about right now. Now, there is a video of Jonathan Majors, and I'm not going to play it because it seems to be, TMZ owned. And I am not trying to get my channel any more copyright issues. So I'm not going to play the video, but you can find it pretty readily. And I think many of you have already seen it in terms of, what may have taken place. Let me see. Where did it go? Yeah. But we'll at least look at one of the latest articles that deals with one Jonathan Majors. So, many of us know Jonathan Majors as an up-and-coming actor. I'd say probably arrived in certain respects. I've always appreciated his art, his acting. He's a very powerful actor. I enjoyed him in a couple of different projects. I didn't really like him as Kang so much. But that had a lot to do with how Kang was written. I was rather bored. But in other films, I really enjoyed him. He's done a number of pieces just in the last couple of years. And when this particular accusation came forth, he was dropped by a lot of the different companies that had hired him. I know he lost movie deals. He obviously just lost Kang, right? Marvel will part ways with Jonathan Majors after guilty verdict. This is the New York Times, and let me see. It's dated December 18th. So this came out yesterday, right? So Majors, who was one of Hollywood's fastest rising stars before misdemeanor domestic violence charges halted his ascent, was found guilty of assault and harassment on Monday for attacking his girlfriend in a car in Manhattan. Shortly after a 6-person jury in Manhattan announced the verdict, Marvel Studios parted ways with the actor, a spokeswoman for the company said. The jury acquitted Mr. Majors on 2 counts that had required prosecutors to show that he had acted with intent, one of assault and one of harassment. But jurors found Mr. Majors guilty on the 2 other charges after more than 5 hours of deliberation. The verdict thwarted Mr. Majors' hopes of salvaging his career by proving his innocence in the March altercation. His future in the film industry is now clouded, and he could face under a year in jail. His sentencing is scheduled for February 6th. Now, the interesting thing about this, I remember a few months ago, many of us saw this online as well, right? Where it was said that she had, I guess, broken a finger and she was beat up. And then they found footage of her that very night at a club. No, hurt fingers, no marks on her of any nature. Everything was fine. The latest footage shows him actually getting out of the car and running away from her. And it's almost somewhere between a minute to 2 minutes, where you can actually see on multiple different cameras her chasing him around corners, down city blocks in Manhattan, the whole deal. She's chasing him. He called the police. And there was people have been making fun of him because he had some idea, where he was telling her to act like Coretta Scott King. I got his point, though. Basically, what he was saying is, if you're going to be my woman, you got to help protect the brand and how you behave. That's what he was basically saying. Those conversations, I would say there's no celebrity that doesn't have that conversation with someone they're dealing with. I think the only time it may not happen is if they're dealing with another celebrity that they feel implicitly understands the importance of the brand idea. But often when you have celebrities that are dealing with just, regular folk, they got to make that clear. So I understood that. Either way, this particular situation, let's kind of cover it. I know it's everything we're talking about now, but in a short period of time, there are going to be people watching this video that aren't going to remember all these details. So I like to go through this for the sake of posterity. So Mr. Majors, 34, wearing a gray suit and gray suede shoes, did not visibly react to the verdict other than to squint slightly and to wrinkle his forehead. He left the courthouse without comment. The jurors found him guilty of reckless assault and harassment after a whirlwind 2-week trial in which the actor, like most defendants, did not testify. Instead, the courtroom heard from his now ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari, 30, who described in detail the altercation that left her ear bloody and finger fractured. On her first day of testimony this month, she gave jurors a full account of what happened, speaking publicly for the first time about the episode. She said that Mr. Majors had received a flirty text from another woman and that she had grabbed his phone out of his hand. First, she said, he tried to pry her fingers away. Then he twisted her hand and her arm. Next, she said, I felt like a really hard blow across my head. Eventually, she said Mr. Majors asked the driver to stop the vehicle. Video that jurors watched showed Mr. Majors jumping out, followed by Ms. Jabari. He turned around, picked her up, and placed her back in the car, appearing to push her back in when she tried to get out. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg said in an email that the trial had demonstrated the psychological and emotional abuse that is far too common in domestic violence situations or cases. He thanked the jury for its service and Ms. Jabari for bravely telling her story despite having to relive her trauma on the stand. Which person was running? Anyway, Mr. Major's lawyer had argued that it was Ms. Jabari who had assaulted their client, and they unleashed a full fusillade of attacks on her before and during the trial, casting her as a liar who sought revenge on Mr. Majors after he strayed. They asked jurors to focus on Ms. Jabari's actions after her altercation with the actor. She had run into 3 strangers who attempted to console her and then had gone out clubbing with them, returning home hours later. Prosecutors urged jurors to remain focused on what had happened in and directly outside the car. Mr. Major's arguments appeared to fall flat. a judge prevented the actor's lawyers from detailing evidence that convinced at least one police detective that there was probable cause to arrest Mr. Bari in October, months after the incident. A lawyer for Mr. Majors was defiant in a statement, arguing the jurors had not believed Mr. Bari's story because they found that Mr. Majors did not intentionally cause any injuries to her. We are disappointed, however, that despite not believing Mr. Bari, the jury nevertheless found that Mr. Majors was somehow reckless, meaning he was with a white woman. She said again, accusing Mr. Bari of attacking him. She added that Mr. Majors still has faith in the process and looks forward to fully clearing his name. In a statement, a lawyer for Mr. Bari, Brittany Henderson, said that the verdict has shown no abuser, no matter how powerful they may seem, is above the law. Right? So anyway, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're dealing with. And regardless of whether or not he has to do time, his career is over, which, if you believe he's guilty, you're not going to lose any sleep about. What I think I'm concerned more about is how much or how little evidence it actually requires to destroy men's careers, destroy their options, destroy their means of supporting themselves and their families, all on the basis of very questionable accusations. These are the kind of things that concern me. Right? Again, I don't come at this with the assumption that every black male is innocent. Every male is innocent. But I also don't come at this with the assumption that every female is innocent. I tend to judge on a case-by-case basis, and I can believe that two people can be wrong at the same time. I don't have a problem with it. Wrong and right can fall all over the place. I tend to look for what the evidence points us to. But I find in the court of public opinion, there's only one type of evidence that's regarded well. And beyond that, that's the end of the discussion for a lot of people. Right? So this is what we're looking at. Now, let's see here. One of the things I wanted to kind of go through in the midst of all of these different types of violations we've been hearing about, right? We've heard about SA, we've heard about rape, we've heard about all these different types of victimization. And there's a couple things I just kind of want to point to real quick. So the first thing comes from a Tumblr page. This is for Recalculating the Gender War. That's actually the name of the page. And using CDC NISVS data, they compared rape to made to penetrate victimization. If you're not familiar with made to penetrate, we've talked about this before. The argument, well, let me clarify this real quick before we jump into that. So the idea behind made to penetrate is that it is what it sounds like, where somebody can actually be coerced or forced to penetrate another person. Now, this is not limited to men. This is not, because you can also use a foreign object or whatever. But the point is, the idea of penetrating another person can be something that someone else is pressured into. And again, because just like when I used the roots analogy, because we don't have an established narrative, most particularly on male victimization, a lot of people don't even believe that's a thing. But one of the things we notice is when we incorporated made to penetrate as an experience that men have. It's not limited to men, as I said. You have lesbians, you have LGBT, you have all kinds of people that participate and experience on both sides of this dynamic made to penetrate. Right? You can have a case on made to penetrate among two lesbians. It's not strictly about men, but it includes men's experiences, because previous definitions of rape only defined it in terms of women's victimization. For generations, they ignored the fact that it could happen to men at all, whether from other men or from women. They ignored it. And so you had cases that were just left on the shelves, not properly classified or counted, because they didn't fall within the specific definition of rape, which for the most part was centered around the violation of a woman's body. When they started to, post 2012, incorporate these various types of cases, what they determined is not that women are never aggressors and men are always aggressors, but that men and women had different styles of sexual aggression. And when you finally incorporated a style that more often than not women participated in as aggressors, we found that the numbers began to shift drastically. So here you have, this comparison of grape as we understand it and made to penetrate. And you can see between 2010 and 2012, right, the comparison. In 2010, you had 1.1% women who experienced grape. You had 1.1% men who experienced made to penetrate. The difference is about 3,000 people out of 1.2 million women and 1.2 million men. There were 3,000 more women that experienced grape than made to penetrate. You get to 2011, and again, 1.6% to 1.7%, meaning 1.9 million, 1,929,000 women, 1,921,000 men, right? And then we get to, then we have a huge drop off by the time we get to 2012. And you have a drastic drop in the number of women who experienced this. Around 700,000 fewer women who had experienced grape in 2012. For men, it went up 30,000, right? So 1% women, 1.7% men, right? 1.2 million versus 1.9 million men. But made to penetrate is still not taken seriously in casual public mainstream circles, right? So that's one thing we can look at. We'll pull up a couple other things. And you really have to kind of push for the data. Now, this is the same time period in ISVS, 2010 to 2012. This is a chart for male victims. And I didn't pull up the female victims because I was kind of pulling this in at the last second. I wish I did, but you can still see. Well, it does include some perpetrators. But there was another chart I was going to compare it to. Either way, though, there's enough information on here for us to look at it. So you can see when it comes to grape, they still frame male perpetrators at a much higher rate, right? Right. But then when you get to made to penetrate, male perpetrators 15%, female perpetrators 78%, or 78.5 versus 15.8, right? So what we're finding with this new data is that there are plenty of male victims that are documented. And this is in a culture, a gynocratic culture, a gynofocal culture when it comes to sexual violation, meaning you don't have generations of media and television and teaching in terms of K through 12 and even college that's framed around female victimization. You don't have all of that when it comes to advocating for males. I remember sitting in these classes in college. They never once talked about male violation. Not once. Not once. There was no such thing as far as they were concerned. Workshops after school, even in K through 12 and during school, I should say, not after, but during school workshops where they trained us about, what we needed to be careful of, and this was in the era of date rape. Never once about male victimization. And yet this data is still there in a culture that doesn't acknowledge that male victimization is actually a thing. In a mainstream culture, in an educational culture, none of which acknowledges it. What would happen if you actually had films that highlighted different cases to show how people actually experience this? Because as long as people don't understand how it's experienced, they don't believe it occurs. But look at the data, right? Let's look at sexual coercion, right? Male perpetrators, 14.5%. Female perpetrators, 81.6%. Sexual coercion. And there's a lot of ways to coerce somebody. A lot of ways. I can reveal some ugly information about you unless you provide me sexual service. If I'm your employer, and I've had this happen, you need to provide me sexual service or you can lose your job. You can go to human resources and complain. I mean, legally, the laws are neutral. They're sex neutral. You can use them as anybody else would. But if the culture around it is not framed around believing you, taking you seriously, it can feel like an empty gesture where you might find yourself victimized later, right? You might have somebody who wants to attack you simply because you attempted to put forth a case to advocate for yourself, especially if you work in an environment that's predominantly female. You have a lot of men that just put their head down and try and get out. They just work until they can find something else, because they know if you're in an environment that's predominantly female and you're going into human resources trying to make a case, how seriously do they take you? This leads a lot of men to not say anything. So far, the only men we're seeing that are starting to say something are, in the class where they can afford to do so. They can afford to advocate for themselves in a way that mostly everyday dudes can't. This is how this is going. So, you can kind of see how these frame out, right? Let's continue. Well, let me say this, just for the record, because sometimes, the show is, people listen to it just in terms of the audio. So let me explain the chart I was just reading from. Table 3.8, sex of perpetrator and lifetime reports of sexual violence of male victims. NISVS 2010 to 2012 average annual estimates. So we saw when it came to made to penetrate and sexual coercion that women outnumbered men as far as being perpetrators. So now we're looking at table 3.6, lifetime and 12-month prevalence of sexual violence by race and ethnicity, men. NISVS 2010 to 2012 data, average annual estimates. What we find, if you look over in so this one is, tabulated by race. So if we look under black, obviously the chart is dealing with men, you can actually look at the raw numbers, right? Contact sexual violence, weighted at 6.5%, 830,000 victims. Made to penetrate, 272,000, right? And that's 12-month prevalence. So in other words, what the chart is saying is that the prevalence under 12 months is pretty, they're giving you the kind of raw numbers there. But you can see it in a number of ways. You can look at it in terms of lifetime. You can see the 2.4 million in regard to contact sexual violence and for a lifetime, right? 12-month prevalence, 830,000. Made to penetrate, lifetime, we're at 1.1 million. And for 12-month prevalence, 272,000, right? So lifetime and 12-month prevalence basically means, somebody over the course of a lifetime versus, as it sounds, somebody who's experienced it over the last 12 months or over a 12-month period. And then, of course, you have non-contact, unwanted sexual experiences. 1.5 million men, lifetime, right? 465,000 in a 12-month period. So these are black men that are experiencing this. And you can see the chart all across the board. You can look at white men, contact sexual violence for a lifetime, you're looking at 12.5 million, right? But we don't talk about this. We don't have conversations about male victimization, male vulnerability. And the vulnerabilities, I'm looking at, especially in regard to this accusation economy. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm concerned about. Okay, hold on. Actually, looks like I did put at least one chart. The reason I have these three highlighted, these numbers here on the right for 12-month prevalence, is there is a chart for women for the same period, 2010 to 2012, 849,000 in terms of 12-month prevalence, 264,000, 628,000. You can kind of look and see the numbers are comparable for men and women. The point is, the numbers for men don't make the discussion. So when we talk about celebrities, when we talk about these high-profile cases of people who are said to be victimizers, we treat it as if victimization is only a one-way dynamic, consistent with a gynocratic culture that ignores male pain. And this is one of the things that we have to begin to challenge. Now, let's go through some more recent stuff. Let's see if we can. I don't know why they put this all out of order, though. Let's see. All right, so let's start here. All right. National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey 2016-2017. So we're moving forward about 6 years or so. Let's see here. And see if I got the right one. No, that's not the one I'm looking for. Is it? No. Page. Hold on, bear with me. Some of the links did not work the way I wanted them to, so they pulled up random ones. Hold on. Hold on. I'm sorry. For some reason, my system is posing them up, posing the wrong ones up, or posing them out of order. Excuse me. So I'm trying to pull up the one I'm looking for, and it's just a little weird trying to find it because there's no discernible title. So forgive me. No, not that one. There we go. So let's start with this one. All right. So this one is a different report. This is the National Intimate Partner and Violence Survey 2016, 2017. And I'll just try and get through just a couple things because I know this is not really kind of format for YouTube. So if we look at this, so the top chart, there's two charts, one on top of the other, right? And the top chart is focusing on women. The bottom chart is focusing on men. And I just wanted to point out very quickly that one of the major differences you notice, so it's basically a type of perpetrator among female victims of sexual violence, National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey 2016, 2017, annualized estimates. One things you can observe is that when it comes to type of perpetrator among female victims, right, acquaintance is the highest for both men and women, right? But you can look at the numbers and look at how comparable they are. For type of perpetrator among female victims at the top, type of perpetrator among male victims. And the numbers are slightly higher for men, that they're dealing with an acquaintance. So again, something we don't think about. And this is in terms of rape, made to penetrate, sexual coercion, unwanted sexual conduct. What you actually see is that men actually have a higher number when it comes to rape, made to penetrate, which you'll notice isn't even on the women's chart, even though it does occur with women, right? Especially among LGBT couples, lesbian couples in particular, I mean, right? But it's much higher in terms of made to penetrate for men, or high numbers, right? And then you have sexual coercion, which is a little bit lower than the women's. And then you have unwanted sexual contact, which is actually higher than the women's unwanted sexual contact. But that's, again, another idea we don't associate with men. We don't associate the idea that men have unwanted sexual contact, not just with other men in terms of LGBT, but heterosexual men who may not want certain types of contact with certain types of women. We don't even consider that that's something that occurs. Let's see. What was the other thing I wanted to kind of pull from? I messed it up because I actually had page numbers for it, but it's completely ruined where I was pulling them from. So let's go old school then. Let's see if I can just, well, I won't accept the hyperlink. So let me try copying and pasting. How about that? I don't know if this, Okay. See if it'll let me pull this up. Bear with me for a moment. 439 watching. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Please support the channel. All right. Let's see if this is the right one. All right. So this is the 2016-2017 report. And if I have the right one, let me see. Try and get to. All right, so let me see if I can enlarge some of this a bit. And look at this. And, you know, I think the only reason I wanted to kind of show a little bit of this is because it's very similar to the 2010, 2012 charts I was showing you earlier. It's also dealing with lifetime and 12-month prevalence of physical violence by an intimate partner. This one's for women. You and the one below it here, see if I can enlarge it a bit, for women. I should have actually kind of teed it up in my PowerPoint instead. Let me see. But all right, so if we look at 12-month prevalence, right, you'll notice for any physical violence, for being slapped, pushed, or shoved, and for severe physical violence, you got rates of about 4.5%, 4%, 3.1%. When you go down to the men's chart, right, actually a little bit higher, right, 5.5%, 5%, weighted over 12-month prevalence, right? So you see some of that kind of being a little heavier. Let's see. Yeah. So, this next chart is for women. It's also dealing with psychological aggression by an intimate partner. You have 12-month prevalence at 6.7%. If you look at men's, same chart, psychological aggression, 7%. Right? Psychological aggression by an intimate partner. So I'm just kind of showing you that even from 2010 to 2016, 2017, you're still seeing the same types of weighted differences as it pertains to violence, right? This is the chart for women that's dealing with contact sexual violence, physical violence, stalking, right, by race and ethnicity. So for Black women, you have 12.3%. And they didn't have a number for American Indian, and you'll see why I say that in a moment. But if you look at men, same chart, right? Black men is at 12.1%. So Black women at 12.3, Black men at 12.1. So just under. But look at this, for American Indians, 18. For males, 18%. Right? So, but these numbers are comparable, right? They're comparable. Sometimes the men have more, sometimes they're in the same range. But again, we're talking about a population of men that are not regarded to be vulnerable at all. So how exactly are we going to have these kinds of conversations if we're going to ignore the data around men altogether? Right? But aside from the data, I had another chart, but I'm not going to pull it up because it doesn't, I can't seem to find it on here. So I'm like, let's just try and get through this. So, let's look at the particular types of cases instead. Right? Let's see if that makes a difference. Because these are the kind of cases that we don't really see highly publicized in a manner where we can make sense of male vulnerability. Now, the public is willing to engage male vulnerability to a point when it comes to boys, but I would still argue it's nowhere near enough. But at least we can begin to understand that sexual aggression in and of itself is not, again, limited to male aggressors. So this is an article, Daily Star, right? It says ex-teacher had sex with student 13, then bought him a gun for his birthday. Taisha Bolden brought the 14-year-old pupil a gun for his 14th birthday, but the relationship fell apart when she refused to buy him another when he demanded it. There she goes. All right. So let me see. So a teacher who allegedly had sex with a student age 13 bought him a gun for his birthday and is now facing 40 years in prison. Taisha Bolden, 34, started a relationship with her student when she was working at Pilgrim Lutheran School in Wisconsin. I'm not even trying on the city. During a court case this week, it emerged the pair sent a whopping 2,200 messages to each other in a 1-month period from May to July. Right? Despite admitting in one message that she knew the victim was underage and that she felt guilty, she also told him, "I want to see you as often as possible, and the rest will just happen." She also sent him several selfies, including naked ones, earlier this year. 34 years old. He's 13 and 14 by the time the situation takes place. All right. Now, the title of the article is that she had sex with him, and they're still playing this game after the last decade of me putting these cases up on Facebook and on YouTube. Obviously, when the genders are reversed, there's no question what term they use, and it's not sex, right? Matter of fact, there are plenty of people, male and female, men and women, that don't see a problem with this at all because they look at it like 13, 14-year-old boy, hey, he can handle it. He's good. Matter of fact, he's coming up. But when it's a girl, then it's a problem. 34-year-old man, 13-year-old girl. Then it's a problem, right? We can see it as a problem then. because we understand how to look at a girl and see her as a vulnerable being. We don't see boys, especially black boys, as vulnerable. We see them as a problem waiting to happen if they're not one already. And as far as sex is concerned, they're aggressors anyway. So when it happens, there are a lot of people that just don't see this as a problem. But I can tell you, as a father, right, to see a young boy at 13, is he mentally and emotionally prepared to deal with a 34-year-old woman? See, look, one of the things I argue about this kind of dynamic, and you'll see this with teachers who are married, single and married across the board. One of the things about this dynamic that people overlook is this is very much about control. Now, we say that when it comes to young girls and older men, but it's still about control when it comes to older women and younger men, or younger boys for that matter. It's very much about control. But in the black community, we have a dynamic that I've referred to before. We have son husbands, which are biological boys who are treated in ways that they really shouldn't be by their own biological mothers. They're treated more like husbands than they are as sons. And we call them son husbands, right? There's an emotional relationship there that doesn't require sex, that is truly, for boys, it's inappropriate. Not only in terms of who he is as her biological son, but in terms of his emotional maturation, right? But we also have what I call husband sons. And these are grown men that women will seek out who are often in a more vulnerable living situation. Unemployed, ex-cons, she has a job, she has a place. And so at the end of the day, she ends up having authority over him. And often he will have to play the game by her rules if he wants her support. And you have women that are seeking out men in this situation because you can get sperm, you can get protection, you can have sex, you can have a travel buddy, you can have all of this as a woman at your disposal. And when you're done, you can send him away. Hell, you can have several kids, and even though he's chronically unemployed or just underemployed or getting paid less for than you can actually divorce him and hit him up for child support. But at the end of the day, whether you're talking about son husbands or husband sons, you're still looking at a control factor. I associate this dynamic of statutory rape with that. You have relationships by older women and young boys, women that know they can emotionally control and manipulate young boys in a manner that these boys are nowhere near prepared for. And it still comes down to the same type of control dynamics that we only find problematic when it's older men and younger women. And the weird thing about it too is even when you have a legal aged younger woman and an older man, it's still treated like he's violated her. You have an 18-year-old girl and a 40-something-year-old dude. It's treated as if he's found a 5-year-old. In the court of public opinion, it's treated the same way. But if you have a 40-year-old woman and an 18-year-old young man, there's no conversation about whether or not she's exploiting him. It's not treated like she trolled the kindergarten, playground for a little kid. It's not treated like that at all. If anything, you hear people calling for more of it, raising the question, why can't older women be with younger men? Why is there such a stigma against it? You don't have a stigma. It's nowhere near compared to the stigma of older men. But when it comes to statutory, underaged girls and boys, we only really know how to see it as a problem when it comes to male aggressors, right? So even though she's being tried for this in the court of public opinion, the question is kind of asked, well, is it really that serious? So that's one of the kind of dynamics that play out here, right? Let's see what else we got. See what else Santa brought in terms of these articles here. And I'm just going to hit them up at random, right? Just going to hit them up at random. So there's another one. Some of you on YouTube may be familiar with this one. U.S. Navy petty officer allegedly plotted to kill Jamaican politician's daughter and her mom. Let me cut that off here. All right. So this young lady. Let me see if it's if you guys are able to see it. Not the best view, but I'll read it. A Miami sailor is in a Jamaica jail accused of a murder-for-hire scheme that left a mother and her 10-month-old dead in a case that's also connected to a Jamaican member of parliament whom the suspect once had a relationship with. Leota Bradshaw, the U.S. Navy confirms, is a petty officer assigned to a talent acquisition team in Miami, is now facing charges of murder and kidnapping, accused of hiring hitmen to kill Tashina Patterson and her daughter, Soraya, in Jamaica. So in other words, what you ended up having is, well, I'll put her picture back up so we can see it. No, I don't want to play the video for copyright purposes, but this young lady, basically what she did is she had a relationship with this member of parliament. He had another woman and a child. She hired a hitman to have them killed, most particularly the mother, right? And this is one of the things I've been talking about for years when it comes to intimate partner homicide. When you're looking at the data around intimate partner homicide, how exactly do you incorporate the data when it comes to women hiring, right? Hiring somebody to either kill their partner or anybody else associated with their partner. This doesn't come across as intimate partner. And this one wouldn't be because, the person that she was intimate with, she didn't target him. She targeted his wife and child. None of that falls within the purview of intimate partner homicide, formally speaking. But even if she targeted him, if he did die in response to that, often, if you manage to catch the killer, it would be one man who killed another man. Right? Now, the first text I found that actually dealt with this was this one here, The Myth of Male Power, right, by Warren Farrell. And one of the things he talked about in this book that I had never heard anybody else talk about at that time when I first read that book, he talked about how wealthier women will hire somebody. Women with means will hire somebody. He said poor women will seduce somebody and use somebody she's seduced and aim him as a weapon to take out somebody else, usually her ex or whatever. Or not even her ex, her husband or boyfriend or whatever. They'll seduce somebody else, manipulate them into killing somebody on her behalf. And again, even if he's caught, it's one man, another man. How much overlap there is between homicide and intimate partner homicide in terms of, kind of a proxy case where you hire somebody to do it for you? Huge question, right? Let me get to some of these super chats. I apologize. Let me see. And missed a few of them. I really do apologize. Let me get through a number of these. I think I stopped there. So shout out to Mr. Me Too. Says thanks Doc for always speaking out on behalf of Black men. Still waiting on my autographed copy of the book. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, but thanks for that support. Orange Pill says, did you talk about Adam Foss, the Adam Foss case, Doc? I'm just dropping in. I did not, but I will pull it up. Let's see what we find. Let's see here. Yep. Manhattan jury clears ex-prosecutor of rape and assault. That's November of this year. Okay. Let's go ahead and stop screen. Yeah, let's look at it. All right. Adam Foss, prominent criminal justice reform advocate, had been accused of assaulting a woman in a Midtown hotel room in 2017. There you go. Okay. Former prosecutor said an encounter he had with a woman who accused him of rape had been consensual. This is dated November 3rd, 2023. Right. Accused of raping a 25-year-old woman while she slept at a Midtown Manhattan hotel room in October 2017. Foss, 43, said their encounter was consensual. His lawyer, Priya Chowdhury, said in a statement after the verdict that her client wanted to express his sincere appreciation to the jury and judge for their diligent discernment of the truth in a complex case. As Mr. Foss turns the page on this chapter, he looks forward to time with his wife and young son, she said, adding that he was carefully evaluating his legal options to address the grave impact these false accusations have had on his life. Mr. Foss was a prosecutor in the Suffolk County, Massachusetts District Attorney's Office. He became nationally known after leaving the office in 2016 and starting the nonprofit organization Prosecutor Impact, which trained prosecutors in practices he believed could lower incarceration rates. A frequent speaker about mass incarceration, he was also featured as one of Fast Company's most creative people, and the Roots 100 most influential Black Americans. The trial loss was significant for the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who has made the prosecution of sex crimes a priority. A spokeswoman for Bragg said prosecutors were disappointed by the verdict, but respected the jury's decision. The verdict followed a 2-week trial and several days of deliberations by the jury, focused on what had happened the night of Mr. Foss's encounter with the woman. The two exchanged texts and calls for about a month before meeting at the hotel. While they were in the hotel room, prosecutors said the woman repeatedly rebuffed Mr. Foss's sexual advancements before she fell asleep and he assaulted her. During closing arguments this week, Ms. Chowdhury sought to undermine the accuser's account as not credible. She described her client's account of the night at the hotel in detail for the jury and cited text exchanges between the woman and a friend later, in which the woman described the night with Mr. Foss as cute and said he was beautiful. The woman's account of what happened changed after Mr. Foss ghosted her. You may think that Mr. Foss should have been more considerate, Ms. Chowdhury told the jury, adding, but that is far different than deciding beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed a rape. Wow. Wow. Shout out to Orange Pill Nurse. Appreciate that. That's powerful. So again, she changed her mind when he ghosted her. Interesting. Shout out to Wrench Turner. Says, salute Doc on the wood as all brothers should. Support Black male media brothers. Much appreciated. Hope you're well, Wrench Turner. I saw some of your YouTube community tab posts. So you're doing your thing. Orange Pill comes back in. Says the way they snuck in that guilty of attacking part is very intentional and incorrect. Yeah, I think he's talking about the Jonathan Majors case at that point. Great I9 says, so she stole his phone, effectively abusing him. That is emotionally abusive and controlling behavior. Real talk. Appreciate that support. Great I9. Shout out to Barry Little for the $5 super chat. Much appreciated. We got Andre. Appreciate the support. He says, thank you for your time and speaking on this, Doc. Much appreciated to you. Leon, shout out to you. Says, issue with word selection for super chat. So I wrote my comment in the chat. All right, I missed it. I apologize. I'll see if I can glance at it, but we had a pretty full night in the comments, so I'm not sure if I can find it. Shout out to Malk Smith. Appreciate the support. Says always on point. Thank you, Doc. And thank you. Appreciate that generous support. So thanks for that. All right. So that being said, why is this doing this? Okay. Hold on. So we were looking at various articles and we had to get that one in. Right? That spoke directly to the point. And again, this is not just happening to celebrities. This is happening to people across the class and occupation spectrum. What makes the news is another question. And again, if the news is only concerned with female victimization and women are not held accountable for false accusations, and to even bring up the concept of false accusations somehow makes you a problem, then we'll never actually have a conversation about justice. And more to the point, we'll never actually have a conversation about the way extortion works in the accusation economy. As long as we can't talk about the way extortion can work and how the system incentivizes women to extort men in the accusation economy, then we're going to have a one-sided conversation. And again, it's not limited to just innocent men. That is an important part of the demographic. It can include guilty men. It can include innocent or guilty women as aggressors and as victims. It works across the board. But if we can't have such nuance to really break down how these situations occur, we just end up with this Manichaean, childish, man bad, woman good dynamic that does not work. And we're starting to see case after case after case where men are coming forward and providing evidence that they're innocent. And these cases are falling apart. And yet, we still continue to have the same kind of conversations. Let's see if we can find another one here. Right? There we go. So this is from People. It says, after man broke up with girlfriend, she drove son to ex's workplace to murder him. And again, I'm bringing up these types of cases to show you the way proxy violence works, right? Hiring an assassin, right? Or seducing one. But in this case, this is her son. So we might be dealing with a son-husband situation. Relatives of Christopher M. Wilson said that they once considered Joyce Brown Rodriguez part of the family, right? So what took place here? So there's a picture of him, right? Let me back this out a little bit. Right, Pennsylvania woman. Well, actually, let me see. Yeah, so there you go. So that's the picture of the woman and her son. Joyce Brown Rodriguez left, and her son Khalil Brown right. Right. Pennsylvania woman was sentenced Monday to 20 to 40 years in prison for conspiring to kill a former lover with her son in 2020. The Bucks County District Attorney's Office said. In July, Brown Rodriguez, 56, pled guilty to third-degree murder and testified that in December 2020, she drove her son Khalil to Middletown Township, Pennsylvania, where Christopher M. Wilson, 52, worked at a recycling facility. When the pair arrived, Brown, 34, got out of the car and fired a gun at Wilson several times, killing him. She then drove her son back to Philadelphia, according to the statement. Brown Rodriguez and Brown were not charged with the crime until March 2022. Brown Rodriguez pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and conspiracy in December and then testified against her son. God damn. Woo. Wow. You're going to bring your son to commit an act of murder on your behalf and then testify against him. God damn. The district attorney's office said Brown was subsequently found guilty of first-degree murder and is scheduled to be sentenced next month. The district attorney's office said that Brown Rodriguez and Wilson had been romantically involved since 2018, but that he had ended the relationship prior to the shooting. Authorities said that the day before the shooting, Brown Rodriguez had called and texted Wilson multiple times and also showed up to the recycling facility with one of the victim's co-workers, saying the two had gotten into an argument. She testified she eventually texted her son asking for help. Brown said he would talk to Wilson, right? Quote, unquote. In the car after the shooting, prosecutors said that she testified that she asked Brown, "What the hell did you just do?" And he didn't say hell, to which he responded, "I didn't feel like talking." Right? Wilson had been a father of 9 children. Jeez. 5 of his daughters gave impact statements in front of Judge Jeffrey L. Finley. The day I got that phone call is a day I'll never forget. One of the daughters said, "Hearing those words crushed me." Wilson's daughters had previously considered Brown Rodriguez a part of the family, saying that she had pretended to grieve with him the day he was killed. According to the district attorney's office, Finley called the crime a callous murder before sentencing her, to 20 to 40 years. She faces life in prison. So you got a son that's willing to shoot somebody because he, quote unquote, didn't feel like talking. And that's the cat you brought with you to talk to your ex because he didn't want to be with you. So we're going to pretend that you didn't know he was capable of that? Okay. Right? That's interesting. What else? What else do we have in Santa's bag here? Okay, we got through some of those. Uh-oh, where'd it go? Dang it, this thing is moving around weird. This one, you know what? This one I just had to include. It just made no sense to me. Now this is a Caucasian woman, but oh crap. Hold on. Let me pause this mess. Anyway, there she goes. At least I stopped it at the right time. Tampa woman posed as a homeschooled 14-year-old to molest middle schoolers. This is December of this year, 2023, December 2nd. This is New York Post. Florida woman pretended to be a 14-year-old homeschooled child to prey on middle schoolers for sex. Alyssa Ann Zinger, 22, was arrested last week for allegedly engaging in at least 30 sexual acts with at least one student and sending explicit videos to several more. It is disturbing and unsettling to see an adult take advantage of a child and prey on them, Tampa Police Chief Lee Burkhaw said in a statement. Anyone who may have been a victim of Zingers, we encourage you to come forward. The Tampa Police Department will support you and ensure a predator like Zinger doesn't cause you and others additional harm. Zinger allegedly crafted her fake persona and communicated with her victims on social media platforms, mainly Snapchat, according to a search warrant obtained by the Tampa Bay Times. Multiple victims who attended Wilson Middle School in Tampa's Hyde Park neighborhood told police they believed that Zinger was their age but was homeschooled. Right? They're There are believed to be additional victims, Tampa police said. The accused predator allegedly inflated a sexual relationship with one of the victims in May, which lasted through September, the warrant states. The victim, a boy between 12 and 15, told police the pair had sex multiple times and that Zinger sent him explicit photos and videos. Another said Zinger sent a video to several children throughout Snapchat depicting sexual intercourse. Zinger allegedly admitted to one victim that she had engaged in sexual activities with other minors, or she admitted that she had. The accused pervert and one of the children were caught shoplifting at a Nordstrom in July, according to the documents. She allegedly tried to keep up the facade in front of her victim and told an officer she was born in 2009, a lie he was unable to verify. The officer confirmed the only other Elisa Ann Zinger he could find information on was born in 2001. In a desperate attempt at deception, she claimed she had a half-sister with the same name. Police had already been investigating Zinger for about a year, according to the warrant. So, anyway. Zinger was charged with 2 counts of lewd and lascivious battery and 5 counts of lewd and lascivious molestation on a victim between the ages of 12 and 15. She's pled not guilty to the charges and was released from jail on the day of her arrest after posting $500 bond on each of her second-degree felony charges. Yeah. This is what we're talking about. This is what we're looking at. And we're acting like this doesn't happen. You know. Let's see. This one. Let me see if I can clear this out. Now, this one is a little different. Apparently, this is from, I guess this is TikTok, and this particular person uses music to talk about, the kind of lyrics and songs that are highly problematic, especially of a sexual nature. But in this particular instance, it looks like she did this with a song by MC Lyte. And I remember the song, I remember the album, and I was about the age of the young men that Lyte's talking about in this particular song when I first heard it. So I'm going to see if I can just play the video without, oh no, that's the wrong one. Hold on. That's the Jonathan Majors video, but I think I have it. Okay, let's see if this is it. Yeah, here we go. So I'm just going to play the video because they have the lyrics on the screen. I'm not going to play the sound for copyright purposes, but this is a song by MC Lyte. Let's see if it'll come up. Okay. All right. So I don't know why, but they put up a fight, and hot damn, that excites the MC Lyte. Because, I love a young buck that gives a firm F, but once in a while they become love struck. That's okay, though. I know how to handle them. I love young boys on the brink of being young men. I mold them, shape them, make them, then I break them in, and they get the job done. I make them get the job done. Well, swell, make them kiss and tell all their friends around the neighborhood that Lyte is good, soul food good. So tell me, honey, are you ready to score? Again, I'll ask, what are you too young for? Right? And the song is called Too Young for What? She says, in the beginning, she says, I'm into little boys. She's talking, I think she was talking about 17 roughly. But again, when you're grown, that's a young boy. It is what it is. It's statutory rape regardless, but she's making music about it. Right? And mind you, the impact of some of these things can be quite traumatic. One of the things we know about R. Kelly is that he was violated by his sister. Both he and his brother were violated by their sister sexually at a very young age, right? Might that have had any impact on him psychologically at a young age? But we don't think about that, right? We don't think about the damage that this can do to young men. And this is why I've been talking for years about a paper by Tommy Curry and Ebony Utley called She Touched Me, that gives an account. It's based on interviews with grown black men who had experienced violation underaged, usually by older girls and older women. And they talk about the psychological impact of that at too young an age. So more than the narrative of he got some and it's all good. No, a lot of these boys end up severely damaged, and there is no treatment for them. There's no public sentiment around what they've experienced. So they have no narrative to share that people can resonate with. And that damage ends up often metastasizing into other things, from emotional well-being to sexual performance, from happening too young at the hands of older women and girls. And so this is the paper where Tommy Curry outlines that Black boys experience one of the youngest sexual debuts. They have the youngest sexual debut, meaning, I guess in common parlance, they lose their virginity earlier than everybody else. And it's considered, in many ways, something that just happens in the community. See, the sexual violation of girls in any community, but especially in the Black community, has a narrative. We understand that. We take issue with it. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen anymore. It clearly does. But if you say that this young girl's been violated, there is a general overall view in the community that that's wrong. And historically speaking, people have lost their lives behind doing it, especially at the hands of Black men protecting families after they found out what's happened. Think about Maya Angelou. When her father and her family members found out that she had been sexually violated at a young age, the man who did it was never heard from again. Right? So there are definitely ramifications that come with that. When boys are violated, there's no public sentiment around it. It's just kind of looked at like, okay. Right? This is why you're never going to hear people talk about MC Light when they talk about the, music and violation and sex. They're not going to bring MC Light up because in the Black community, most particularly, it's not really, there's no collective view on looking at how boys are sexually violated. There's no collective. I mean, there's a general public statement that anybody would make about how it's wrong. But for the most part, people don't see it as a problem. And then you'll have people that will blame boys and men because of this whole idea that they got some, right? So boys and men become responsible for the violation of boys because boys and men cheer for it. This is how women will often articulate it. But nobody talks about how women amongst each other dialogue about this. And we've seen it on Twitter. We've seen it on social media, where if you post pictures of handsome young boys, you'll have grown women 20 and 30 years younger, boys as young as 2 to 5 years old being sexualized by grown women, talking about them like, ooh, I would give him some. Ooh, he's fine. Ooh, lucky he's not here. And this will be about 3-year-old boys. I published this stuff, posted this stuff on Facebook over the last 15 years. I think it's at least over the last 12. It's been going on for the longest, and it's acceptable. So if there's no, problem with boys being presented this way, how then do we look at men? Those same boys when they get older, do we care? So if we can't even care, if we can't even empathize, are we going to even address that there's a whole economy that's built up around accusations, that's incentivized women to participate in it in a one-way dynamic where they can only profit? Their names are not often even put in the news. They're not going to even be slapped on the hand. They're definitely not going to go to jail for false accusations, but they might get to walk up on a bag and leave with one. At worst, what are we seeing? Some of these women getting zero payouts when it becomes clear that they've lied. And that's it. And I think those are the kind of situations we got to start having different conversations about. We got to start actually advocating for boys and men in a new way. Most particularly amongst the men themselves. We actually have to start to have empathy for other men and boys, because these policies are used against us in a one-way fashion. And it is incalculable how many of these are being used against us in terms of what's happening to men and boys. We have some documentation around it, but I suspect it's nowhere near what it actually is. So at some point, we got to do this. And these cases that are coming up consistently show the lack of empathy. Right? You have people that fundamentally believe that Jonathan Majors should go to jail regardless of the evidence. And what are we talking about now? He pulled his phone back from his ex who was taking it from him, and then he ran around the block. Really? Anyway, shout out to y'all for coming through. Um, Apologize that I didn't get to. You guys had a grip of comments, and I really hope I didn't miss too much. I'm going to have to go through them. Shout out to Orange Pill Nurse again for the contribution. Says Janelle James from Abbott Elementary Show, Doc. Check it out. Hey, man, you got good credit here after the last recommendation. So, and the thing about this is there are so many of these cases. I post on them almost weekly on social media. And, you know, they don't make the public, it doesn't get the public's attention. Let me see. Oh, I think I know who this is. I know who this is. Yeah, I saw the video for this. I don't have it primed. I probably couldn't play from with it anyway. But yeah, I saw this. It's not letting me play it. But this is the comedian from Abbott Elementary who was talking about seeing her teenage son come out of the shower, and she observed that he now had an adult penis. And she didn't use that terminology, of course. But from there, what she started to talk about at a certain point was when he was a baby, how she would play with his penis while changing his diapers. And so she was basically making a joke that now he's a grown man, that penis needs to have a job. And she's kind of making these kind of statements. But it's not until you reverse the genders that you see how problematic it is. Have a black male, adult male comedian in his 30s or 40s making jokes about playing with his newborn daughter's vagina while changing her diapers. Is that still funny? Does that make you laugh? Right? You have a lot of people that are dismissing this as, oh, it's just a bad joke. It's not that serious. But again, when you reverse the genders, that's how you know. And if you're just coming into this space where you're examining this whole question of anti-black misandry and whether or not misandry is a real thing, when you run on a case-by-case basis into things that you're not sure about, reverse the gender and then ask yourself if it's still acceptable. And we did that earlier, right? We talked about the 13-year-old boy who was dealing with a 34-year-old woman. Is it acceptable when it's a 13-year-old girl dealing with a 34-year-old man? See, that's when I notice people start to get like, oh, that shouldn't happen. But nobody cares when it's a 13-year-old boy. Do the same thing with this joke. Newborn daughters with changing diapers. Is that funny? But in many ways, it highlights, what is not acceptable. Or excuse me, what passes as acceptable as long as it doesn't have to deal with men. So shout out to Orange Pill Nurse. Appreciate that suggestion. Here's what it is. But we got to be able to call it out, and we got to be more willing to empathize for other black boys and men, for other boys and men, period, on some levels. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to mirror what feminists did, white and black, in terms of attacking men. But at the same time, if there are cases that we can advocate for that advance politics that are in our interest, we do so on the basis of the case and not on the basis of associating with groups, just because they exist. No, we focus on the policies we're trying to put in place and the cases we're trying to call attention to. So I called out a number of cases, some of which dealt with celebrities, others dealt with everyday people in crazy situations. But this stuff is common. But as a society, we only pay attention to one dynamic and we ignore the other. And we have to be the voices for other boys and men who are going through this and don't have a voice. So advocate as if this was your own son. Advocate as if this was your own father. This is you yourself being attacked, being arbitrarily, in many circumstances, accused with no evidence in the court of public opinion and in actual legal courts. These things have to be called out. So anyway, appreciate you guys coming through. I look forward to hearing examples that you may know that I didn't cover. And there are plenty of them, because all the examples you guys saw me put up tonight, I gathered in about 20 minutes. I bullshit you not. I just pulled them together. They're not, I've had a lot of these, Facebook is really where I post a lot of the stuff so I can come back to it later. But there are so many of these cases they're hard to keep up with. They make the news, but they don't really make the news. So I look forward to hearing about either situations you know of directly or from cases you're familiar with that I didn't cover that highlight the dangers for men of this accusation economy. Other than that, you guys have a good night. I will holler at y'all later. Peace. We are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.